Did you know that the U.S. national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, was inspired by a battle in the War of 1812? The War of 1812 isn't the most well-known war, but it was very important at the time. It was the first major conflict the United States had after their independence. It's a war that's often glossed over because the cause isn't clear, the objectives are foggy, and the result was more or less neutral? On the American side, there were no great generals either, like Grant, Eisenhower, or Washington. The US got that national anthem out of it, but the war itself seems like it was more important at the time than it looks in the rearview mirror. Why did the United States start the War of 1812? It starts with the Napoleonic Wars between Great Britain and France at the turn of the 19th century. The two nations were the major colonial superpowers of their time, and the United States was only a couple decades old. As Napoleon waged campaigns to conquer Europe, the US stayed cautiously neutral. It was a new nation that knew that first impressions were everything. At this time in North America, the UK held Canada to the north, and the US had started making some new states in addition to the original 13 colonies, like Kentucky and Tennessee. The US had also bought the Louisiana Purchase from France, from Napoleon. Napoleon sold it to the US because he needed the funds from his purchase to finance his wars in Europe, and he needed a guarantee that none of his enemies would take Louisiana from him because he was in no position to defend it. Napoleon knew he couldn't defend Louisiana because just to the south, on the island of Hispaniola, a French colony by the name of Haiti had just launched a successful slave revolt. Haiti was the second country in the Americas to gain independence 27 years after the US. If Haiti could go independent, it's possible other French landholdings could revolt or be taken as well. Now, these wars were costly to the two superpowers, and the US was in a super good position. Because of their neutrality, they could trade with both the UK and France. France didn't like how the US had traded with the UK after France helped the US break away from the UK, so American neutrality wasn't something that France had entirely appreciated. This neutrality was commercially very advantageous to the US. There was so much trade that there was a shortage of sailors and merchants, so naturally, a lot of unpatriotic British men would fake American citizenship and join the trade disguised as Americans. This pissed off the Brits, who would intercept American trading vessels to capture and sometimes execute traitors to the crown. This would leave some ships stranded without much of their crew, and sometimes American citizens were abducted by the British to either fight in their navy or be dropped in the ocean. This process was called impressment. Eventually, the Napoleonic Wars had come to a standstill. After Napoleon's heroic victory at the Battle of Austerlitz, the French had control of continental Europe. Six weeks earlier, Great Britain had a major naval victory at the Battle of Trafalgar. France had the armies, but no navy to attack the UK, and the UK had the navy, but no army to stop France. The hot war then turned into more of a cold economic one. This was bad for the United States, who had been taking advantage of the war by trading with both warring nations. Now, both the UK and France were trying to stop neutral nations from trading with their enemy, and this put the US in a tough spot. After several years of fighting to trade with both the UK and France, the US was pushed to embargo both nations who wouldn't respect their right to trade. An embargo is when a nation stops all trade with the country. And this sucked. The US became super isolated and shipping dropped 80% in a year. This caused many industries such as cotton and fur exports to suffer considerably in addition to the economy taking a downward turn. Things were bad in the US. The American Congress was beginning to debate going to war. Congress believed that if the UK was forced to have another armed conflict on their hands, they would deem it too expensive and be forced to go to the negotiating table over trade. The debate began on how they would attack Great Britain. Would they invade Canada? Would they restrict the fighting to naval battles on the high seas? A land war was seemingly unavoidable. Another conflict had been brewing on the US border that answered this question for them. There was another reason the US wanted to go to war, but this was off to the west. While the Atlantic trade issue was going on, out in the territories to the northwest, the US was doing its usual thing, expanding westward and forcing Native Americans into predatory one-sided treaties. Due to growing Native anger and resentment against Washington, the Shawnee Indian chief Tecumseh worked to unite many tribes in the American Northwest into a confederacy. The governor of the Territory of Indiana, William Henry Harrison, saw a concerning number of natives massing in his territory and decided to attack Tecumseh at the Battle of Tippecanoe. It was a U.S. victory, but with heavy casualties, and Canadians were rumored to have given support to the hostile natives in the region in exchange for intelligence on the U.S. side of the border. Keeping Americans busy with combative Native Americans would slow down their colonization of the Midwest and would keep them from advancing on the Canadian fur trade. Anglophobia, or the hatred of the UK and British Crown, was at heights not seen since the Revolutionary War. Animosity toward Native Americans was also at an all-time high. Couple this with a damaged economy and trade restrictions, and it seemed like the US was ripe for a war. When Congress convened to discuss the war, the main reason was free trade and sailors' rights, but there were many reasons the US wanted to declare war on Great Britain. The US was economically boxed in, it would force the Brits to negotiate on trade, it would take out the natives to the west, guaranteeing westward expansion, it would stop the British from funding natives in the future in campaigns against the United States. Some were even talking of conquering parts of Canada and annexing British territory into the United States. Many saw the way the UK was treating the US as soft colonialism by commercially subjugating them to trade restrictions and abducting their crew members. One big picture reason was that the United States was the only republic in the world at that time. This war was also a chance to prove that republics worked and that democracy was a stable system, and that the new fledgling country was able to hold their own. Oh yeah, one other big reason, and this is solely because the US is a democracy, elections were coming up. So, in 1811, a war Congress convened. Over the course of the session, a bill passed in the House, then Senate, and was signed into law by President James Madison. The US formally declared war on the United Kingdom in June of 1812.